And any kid that we meet in a public school, when they come here to the studio to dance, they're automatically on scholarship. They've also started providing tutoring for students, one-to-one mentoring for kids that come through here, college and career access help. You name it. We're trying to do that whole child development.
When you think of the word shalom, what comes to your mind? Completeness, wholeness, peace, and prosperity. Those are all probably pretty standard, but what about things like ballet, or tap, or any other form of dance for that matter? Well, this week we're highlighting an alumnus for whom those words absolutely conjure images of God's shalom. We're hanging out with another alum from one of InterVarsity's focus ministries, and this week we're looking at BCM, or Black Campus Ministries, although our alum knew the group as Collegiate Black Christians at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. His name is Matthew Best, and he is now the executive director at New Ballet Ensemble and School in Memphis, Tennessee. And through the medium of dance, Matthew and his colleagues are hard at work providing young people with access to the arts, mentorship, tutoring, and a skill set that will help them excel in college, a passion that was heavily influenced by his time on campus with InterVarsity through CBC. Similar to last week, this is actually part of a longer interview from our other alumni podcast, InterVarsity World Changers, and you can find a link to that podcast in the show notes. Welcome to After 4, your podcast for navigating life after graduation. I'm your host and guide, John Steele, and this one's for you, alumni. Well, Matthew, welcome to the InterVarsity World Changers podcast.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And crazy to think that, what year was 2007? What was that? 17 years ago, I got introduced to InterVarsity, and I'm on a podcast for IV 17 years later. It's kind of crazy, but it's fun. Fun to be here.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Well, it's fun to think back on the history that we have and the places that the Lord takes us in the midst of those things, and and here we are.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So that is you said it. I'm sure it'll come out in our conversation, but my life is very much the places the Lord takes you. I will just say that. Like, it is, there is not a single way that you could have convinced anybody that I planned any of this crap. So there you go. So it's just, but we're here.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, I am excited to hear some of those stories today, Matthew. As we get to know you here, would you just give us an introduction and help us know this person that we're going to be talking to today?
Sure. So Matthew Best, originally from Memphis, Tennessee, ended up going to college at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, which for those that don't know any Tennessee geography, yes, they are in the same state, but no, they are nothing alike, and nor are they anywhere close to each other. So got really involved in InterVarsity. I always tell this story. UT was the last of the 6 schools that I got into that I wanted to go to, and it was the only one I did not take a visit to. And I felt so deflated and so disappointed that my own kind of like not being super dutiful, not being super organized, that I didn't get enough scholarship money to go to anywhere else, and so I kind of was stuck going to the place that was the cheapest option, which was Tennessee. And I remember being on campus for 2 days, and I walked past a table that says Collegiate Black Christians. And I remember looking at a friend of mine. I said, well, I'm Black, I'm in college, I'm a Christian, so I guess I better talk to these people. And so I did. And literally, no lie, that day, I felt like all the disappointment, all the stuff I felt before went away, because I was like, no, I was supposed to be here. And So that was a really cool kind of experience. And so I literally was involved in InterVarsity before the first day of class, my freshman year. And so it's, and again, at that time, we didn't know what InterVarsity was. Like, we just knew we went to CBC. We found out what InterVarsity was later. I'm sure lots of people, especially in the ethnic specific chapters, have that experience. And there's a reason for that, and that's a good thing. But anyway, so that I got involved my freshman year, got really serious about Jesus over the course of that year. I started leading a Bible study the following year, became president of the chapter a year after that, another year and a half after that, then came on staff immediately, even graduated early on purpose just so I could come on staff. So I was 21 when I came on staff, and which was interesting because I had students older than me in the chapter, which created some problems sometimes. But it was, we navigated and we made it work. So originally went to school to be a doctor, realized that wasn't the thing, decided to settle on what was always my backup plan to get a degree in journalism. But rather than go into working for a newspaper or working on TV, I went straight on staff. And then always worked other little part-time jobs here or there while I was on staff. Stayed on staff for 7 years. Got to use my journalism degree a little bit. Then that's when things really shifted for me. And while I was on staff, I started serving. I started taking my college elite students, my student leaders, to go mentor middle school kids. And so what we would do is we'd go have lunch with these middle schoolers. And that is literally where my life and even the scope of what my ministry looks like changed. That's kind of where I fell in love with this idea of community development and how do you do ministry in a way that changes neighborhoods and changes whole environments. Because what happened is I go into these schools every week with my college students, and I did it just to give them a reason to kind of give back as leadership development as we often do. But what I found as I was having a conversation with these middle school kids and as my students were, is I just kept thinking, okay, I'm hearing their stories. I'm hearing them talk about stuff that they have no control over in their life. I'm hearing them talk about things that I can't speak into at all. And I keep thinking what's going to change life for these kids is not more of me and not just more of my students and not just more hours in the week of me intervening. What happens if we change the neighborhood that lead to the reason these kids need an intervention in the first place, right? Wow. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was essentially me thinking about Christian community development. CCDA is another great organization. Shout out to them. So anyway, from that point on, what I thought my life in ministry would look like began to shift. And so literally since then, I said, no matter what I do, whether it's in a full-time ministry job or not, I'm going to be doing that. I want to be changing communities so that young people have better lives. And that's literally what I've been blessed to be able to do since then. I've had several jobs since then. We don't have to go through all of them, but that kind of got me into that nonprofit space. And that's kind of where I've been and where I'm going to think the Lord has me for a long time. So, yeah.
Wow. So from this CBC encounter before classes even start to like full on involved in the chapter, graduating early so you can join staff, which I think for many of us that if you've joined staff or you've found sort of like this step into ministry, you're like, okay, I have found the thing. I found my calling here. Yep. And then it was in the midst of that you found maybe even a more specific direction that God was calling you into, like ignited something that it seems to me maybe you didn't even recognize was there.
Well, it's crazy. So, here's another just story that it's just crazy. So I remember really struggling with fundraising, like folks often do. And I remember sitting in a donor meeting with somebody that also runs a nonprofit, which probably wasn't the smartest idea in the world. Like, you go after another guy that runs to fundraise and do nonprofit work to give money. And I remember sitting in his office, and he said, "Yeah, I can't give you much, but I'll give you $50 a month." But he really was supportive. And then I'll never forget this. I was sitting in his office in downtown Knoxville, and he said, "Well, Matthew, can I pray for you?" And to this day, I don't know what he said. I don't remember what he said. But all I did hear from the Lord was Knoxville is the place. And so the reason why that was significant for me was because I kept thinking that my calling was tied to university, was tied to college students. I was going to do this and then go serve at church one day, 20, 30 years down the line. But from that moment, I really felt led to invest in the city. And so that's where these conversations with these middle school kids kept coming up, and other stuff happened after that. And literally from that moment, I knew, okay, whether I get funded or not, I've got to serve Knoxville. And so I did. Like, I got more involved in the community. I actually started raising more money after that. I bought a house after that. My wife and I started dating after that, and got married a year and a half. Like, all these things started to happen as I realized my calling was more than my job title, right? And so it freed me up to be in a variety of different spaces and still fulfill my calling. So whether it was going to be at this nonprofit or at this Christian university or at this nonprofit or whatever, I was still fulfilling my calling to serve the city. And I fell in love with Knoxville in a way that I could not have imagined being from Memphis. I mean, I don't know, again, a black kid from Memphis falling in love with Knoxville just does not make sense, right? They're so different. And it's most folks are trying to graduate and get up out of there. And so, but I fell in love with that city. And so I ended up investing the next, 10 years of my life at that point in trying to serve the city. I ran for office. I was on committees for the mayor's office. I started a community foundation for a high school. Like I started doing all this stuff simply because I was trying to respond to that calling to serve the city. And it just was transformative in a way that I can't even articulate.
Yeah. Now that's really interesting because as I was, I know of a few of the different positions that you've held, and coming into this conversation, my thought was, well, clearly Matthew has a calling to teens and young adults, that's
Sure.
your area, but it's interesting to me that you phrase it as this calling to the city. Tell me what it is, and there must be an overlap between those two in some ways, again, based on the specific jobs you've held, but what is it about the city that is the draw for the way that God has called you to serve him in your context?
A good friend of mine, Demetrius Jaggers, who's a pastor and a former higher ed person and a former nonprofit. I had the pleasure of following him in a particular job that I was doing. And he used to always talk about Jeremiah 29, but not 11. He talked about the front part, right? When it says seek the peace of the city.
Yeah.
And this idea of serving the place that you are, even if you feel like it's exile, right? That's why that passage is so important, because he's saying, the prophet is saying, don't jump ahead to the deliverance that's coming in 70 years. He said, no, I'm going to bless you and use you while you're here. And this is where this comes from. You're blessing this place ultimately blesses who else? Literally everyone else around you, right? So it's it's such a simple but profound thing to come to grips with. And so for me, that was if I serve the city, if the city's healthy, if neighborhoods are healthy, if communities are healthy, if schools are healthy, right? Then it's ultimately gonna it's ultimately going to benefit everybody. And I think for me, the easiest thing that you see young people benefit when neighborhoods get healthy. You see young people benefit when poverty is dealt with. You see, everybody can get behind, how do I serve kids? Nobody has an argument for that. Nobody's saying you shouldn't do it.
Right.
And so I think that's part of it, is that even doing youth work allows me to speak to these other things as it relates to what's healthy for our community. So yeah, I mean, that's for me. You're right. I do think there is probably a calling in there to young people in some way. And I've been doing that work, and I find that work very valuable, and I love it. But I just want to see people in places whole. And I don't think enough of us use that lens for the work that we do. I think a lot of us want to do good, which is fine. But I do think that the idea of promoting justice and equity in environments that are conducive to flourishing, that is a different deal. And you have to be very intentional about that. And you have to be very specific about that. And it's even messier. Charity work is not necessarily messy. But justice work is incredibly messy because it involves getting enmeshed with these systems that lead to the injustice in the first place. And so, anyway, I'm on a tangent here, but you get where I'm saying. These are the things that have popped up for me over the years, and as I've grown in my understanding of those things, it's honestly made the work I do even clearer for me in terms of what God might be calling me to.
Which makes total sense, and this is the second time that you've brought up something similar to that. But that makes sense because in the midst of that invitation to seeking the peace, the prosperity, the shalom of the space around you, you said literally everyone else experiences that wholeness, including you. That's part of the promise that was there as well, is that as you seek the prosperity of the people around you, you will experience it too. And you said yourself that once I started doing this, that's where I started having more vision towards the work that I was doing. I started raising more money. I met my wife. This, that, and these things happened that you could start to see wow, as I was seeking the wholeness of others, I was gaining traction in my own life as well. And not as a name it and claim it sort of prosperity gospel moment, but as a experiencing the goodness and the generosity of God by pursuing kingdom work.
I love that you phrase it that way, because that's the kicker, right? Why motives matter, right? Why do I do the thing that I do? Why do I care about this thing? Do I care about this thing being good because of me, or do I care about this thing being good because that's what God desires, right? I was actually in Knoxville yesterday. I'm sure we'll get to it. I'm in Memphis now. I've been in Memphis the last 3 months. That's a whole nother story. But but which that's another God thing, because I had no intentions of ever leaving Knoxville. I'll be honest with you, I did not. But anyway, I was back in Knoxville preaching at the church that I was assistant pastor at for a number of years, and literally talking about the idea of like, you can't love God without loving people. And if that's your motivation, then then the good things happen. Then all the other stuff comes if your motives are right. Which again, it sounds simple and we know it, but it's a check that we have to keep constantly like applying to our lives. Like, okay, why am I really doing this? And so anyway, yeah, I'm with you. I appreciate that. That was very well said, John.
Yeah, it's that seek first the kingdom of heaven mentality, and all these other things will be added to you. Matthew, can you share any I do want to talk about like the last 3 months and sort of some of the specific work that you're doing now. But before we do that, even just thinking big picture, like, are there some stories you can tell about ways that you've seen God at work and moving? Like, these are ways that I've gotten to partner with God in these last, however many years. And here's some crazy things that he's done in these places I've been working.
So this one is crazy, but also really kind of intertwined with some serious tragedy that I don't think I've experienced of anything even close to it. Part of me serving the city and loving the city was I moved into probably one of the highest poverty neighborhoods in Memphis, in Knoxville. And it wasn't on purpose. It just was what I could afford at the time. Right. But This is another spot where God does something, and he's setting you up for something that you don't even realize. I'm literally, the house that I was in Knoxville was literally walking distance from the lowest performing high school in the city, the only still fully predominantly Black high school in the city, and the one that is under-resourced more than any other school in the city. And it's been that way for a while, right? And I literally walk my dog past that school every day, or every other day. So I'm in this neighborhood, and I'm connected. I'm serving. I've worked with kids from this school. I eventually start coaching at this school. And in 2021, over the course of 8 months, we have 6 young people shot and killed. They all go to that school. Right? And one of them happened in front of the school, literally.
Wow.
That one I heard at my house. I was on a Zoom call doing a conference on faith and social justice that I was leading and had planned and all that kind of stuff. And I get a text message after I heard the shots in my house. I get a text message from one of my players telling me that it was one of my basketball players that got killed. Right?
Oh,
a day I will never forget, and one of the hardest days I've ever had. And in the midst of all of that, we had been trying to do some work to serve this school. We had been trying to start a community foundation to provide some money. We ended up, in the course of 5 to 6 months, raising something like $170,000. And
wow.
the last 3 years, we've given away $110,000 to that school. And it happened through meeting like-minded community members and neighborhood folks. And it happened through me meeting the right people. Like, there was somebody that was able to fast track the establishment of our foundation and give us a way to, we were able to use the National Christian Foundation to help facilitate the funds, which meant I didn't have to get a 501c3. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was all these people kind of came together one after the other to make this thing happen, to allow us to do something tangible to serve this school. And so people were thinking that we did it in response to the violence that happened that year, but it wasn't. It had been in the works for months. It just so happened to culminate at this time when this school in this neighborhood was having a really, really rough time. And so it was nothing but God that happened the way that it happened. And it's literally the thing I'm the most proud of to this day. And it's the one thing in ministry and in service that I didn't get paid a dime to do, right? Like it wasn't in my job description. I can't put it on my resume because we were just doing it to do it. But with the Lord, in some crazy ways. And so, yeah, I'm really proud of that. Like, that was, you can look up the Austin East Foundation, and we've been able to support some really cool stuff at that school that still needs a lot of resources. And so just grateful that God is still using that to keep serving kids and teachers in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I mean, like you said, the way that timing worked out, to feel like, boy, at this moment, if there was something that could be used to buoy the spirits, to bring some sense of this shalom and wholeness in the midst of just absolute brokenness and sadness. But that it wasn't just for that moment, that this is something that has carried on beyond, that it outlives that moment, and that it continues to serve people who need it. Like you said, there's still, like, we still want to see this grow. We still need, there's more that's needed, but wow, to see God come through in that moment, in something that is carried on, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is an amazing story, and just one, I'm sure, of many that you could tell about how God has come through. But let's jump ahead to these most recent few months. Now, Matthew, my understanding is that you work with New Ballet. Am I correct about that?
I'm the executive director of New Ballet Ensemble and School.
Okay.
I was a student here years ago when I was in high school, middle and high school. Started dancing here in 2002. I was, that's for those that, were you at Urbana 12 or Urbana 15?
Yes.
So you saw me, my very large self, dancing on stage in the performing arts team.
That's awesome.
That was my first time dancing since high school, actually. So that was an interesting, another cool InterVarsity kind of thing.
Wow.
That was, I was able to get back on stage and perform and dance and do some cool stuff there. But so this is another way where God orchestrates the story. So New Ballet Ensemble, what we do is we provide professional quality dance training regardless of ability to pay. And so what that looks like is 70% of the kids that come here are on some type of scholarship, many of them full scholarships. Dance training is not cheap in the typical sense, but we also provide free dance classes, a variety, not just ballet, hip hop. There's a style in Memphis called juking that's pretty unique. Tap, flamenco, we do it all, and we often provide classes for free to kids in public schools during the school day, during the instruction day.
Okay.
So, and that's something we're really proud of. We've been doing that for 16 plus years. So much so that there's kids that we've met in elementary school that took a dance class once a week and are now professional dancers, dancing in Europe and all that. It's just crazy, right? And any kid that we meet in a public school, when they come here to the studio to dance, they're automatically on scholarship. And so that's our way of kind of providing equity and access in the arts world. But then in addition to that, and this is what's another thing that's really cool, New Ballet's been doing that for a while, but since I've been gone, since I was in Knoxville for 16 years, they've also started providing tutoring for students, one-to-one mentoring for kids that come through here, college and career access help. You name it. We're trying to do that whole child development. And so what was really cool is I was doing that work in Knoxville. I just wasn't connected to the arts. And so now I get to come back to Memphis, continue to bring that experience of the work I was doing in Knoxville, and now get connected to something also that's really near and dear to my heart, which is the performing arts. And so that's really, really, and another crazy story. I invited New Ballet to Knoxville to help me raise money for the last nonprofit I worked at. If it hadn't been for that invitation, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be here. It was a cool way for me to say, I want to bring this to Knoxville because this would be great. But then it also kind of like opened, there was this incredible avenue that was created because I wanted to bring the incredible work New Ballet was doing to Knoxville. And now I'm back here kind of taking us into the next phase of our strategic plan. And so it was nice to come back home. My wife is from here. Both sets of grandparents were here. Like the Lord really worked it out and kind of orchestrated something that I really didn't see coming. And so I'm grateful to be back here doing arts education work, creative youth development, and still producing and promoting really, really beautiful art by way of dance. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's so I mean, it feels to me, I don't want to put words in your mouth and say that this has actually been your experience, but it again, going back to this Jeremiah 29 story, that rather than sitting and languishing away in this in-between space, that you were working alongside the Lord and what he was doing there, and now he has brought you back with not just to say like, come back to your old life. It's finally time to get back to your roots and do the thing that it's like, no, now you have a revitalized and refreshed vision of what it looks like to partner with me. And now I'm going to take you back home to be close to all of these people.
Come on, John, preach, John. Come on, brother. Like, yeah. So like, and it's like, that's exactly, it's this is not for everybody. So I am not making some large theological statement. So
Absolutely.
please don't accuse me of heresy. But the way that me and the Lord have kind of worked out, and this is something I've been praying literally since I was in college, and I kind of live my life. I think my personality makes this work too, but I'm like, okay, God, if there's a door you have for me, open it. If you don't have it for me, close it. That's an oversimplification, but that's kind of the way it allows me to live my life with peace. And that is kind of what's been happening, right? And I think, I used to tell students all the time, I'm like, following Jesus is one big yes followed by a lot of little yeses. That's kind of the way that, opportunity comes up. Is, if it's from him, sure, I'm going to do it. I want to go forward. I don't know where it's going to end. I don't know I don't know how long it's for. I don't know any of that stuff, but I'll just keep saying yes, because saying yes to Jesus never backfires, right? Like it's
right.
Again, not trying to oversimplify this, but I think this also is like part of that whole like childlike faith thing where it's like, don't make this stuff more complicated than it has to be. Like just, and anyway, that's been my experience. God's been so faithful in the midst of it. And I get to come into this office every day. I don't even have, you can see down here, I don't even have my degrees and stuff on the wall. But
I'm still getting settled.
I get to come in here every day and feel really good about the work that we do and feel like, no, I am not proselytizing or giving calls to discipleship at the top of the stairs every day in the building. But the work that I'm doing is, I really believe, kingdom building work that's serving young people and allowing them to live better lives and create more opportunities and doing stuff that blesses the city. For me, that feels like ministry to me. The good thing is I can still preach on the weekends if I want to. Like it's not a big deal.
There you go.
But anyway, so that's kind of me. That's where I'm at.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that you said that, because that's actually the next thing that I wanted to ask you about. And that's, as we remember our days as students with InterVarsity, we would talk about lives transformed, campuses renewed, world changers developed. I mean, we would say those things all the time. And here on this podcast, like world changers developed and being a part of God's world-changing work. Like that's people that have had a formative experience with InterVarsity and who are a part of this process of world-changing work. Like those are the people that we want to talk to here. And so I do want to ask you, somebody who's gone from InterVarsity staff work, who has worked in churches, who preaches all of these things, who has done what people would say, oh yeah, you were doing ministry. And now for the uninitiated, well, you're working for a ballet company and school. Okay, I think that some things might get lost in translation. So tell me, because I believed what you said is absolutely true. Yeah. So Matthew, tell me, how is God changing the world with ballet?
And again, not just ballet. We probably they thought about a name change some years ago, but it was too hard. It was not going to happen. But
sure.
It's
with dance.
I'll give you a perfect example. There's a young man who I've had the pleasure of knowing for the last couple of years now, who got a full scholarship to Howard University they pick one Chadwick Boseman scholar a year to get a 4-year full ride to do arts work. He came from this school. He never paid a dime to take class here because his parents couldn't do it, right? Tell me that's not changing a life, right? And that's not and what's amazing is that it's a unique story to that school. That's not a unique story for this place, right? There are people that have jobs and that can teach dance and they get to travel and perform. But there's also people that use this space to then get to go to college and go become nurses or become whatever, because they had a place where they felt welcomed, where somebody cared, where people were able to wrap their arms around them, prepare them for the next thing. And they're also getting mentored. And so for me, that can't help but be kingdom building work. And then we also know, too, that when you have those conversations with people, you grow those relationships, then there's more opportunities to even talk about that more direct faith stuff. But I'm also at the place where I'm like, even if I don't have a conversation with somebody about salvation, does that make me what I'm doing any less ministry? And I don't think so. And again, now that might create some theological dilemmas for some folks. But I think that as long as people are moving towards wholeness, that then leads to more opportunities for us to talk about that stuff, right? And people want to hear. People will be willing to listen to what you have to say if you're actually about trying to promote their well-being and trying to make sure that they're whole and healthy and that kind of thing. And don't worry, I still got my illuminated scripture journal Bible full set back here. There's lots of, still very much a Jesus lover. And people here know, it's not a problem. There's not an issue. But, so I hope that answered your question. But yeah, I think serving folks is and changing lives. And, I always talk about, we don't save anybody. And when you're doing youth development work, what you can do is you can change the trajectories. And so I think that's kind of what, and that's what my life has been about across the last several jobs I've had, is what can we do to change the trajectory of somebody's life? And that's what we do here every day.
Yes. So it sounds to me like New Ballet Ensemble and School and the work that you're doing there is a part of seeking shalom, seeking wholeness, seeking peace for the people around you.
That's right.
So that there are more and more opportunities for them to continue accessing the arts, to continue accessing the unique ways that God has created them and gifted them. And even if it's not you, that the Lord is providing opportunities for them to meet Him in so many different ways. And you are one of many people who are part of that process of the work that He's doing of restoration and bringing life to this space that you're living in now.
Well said. I couldn't say it better myself, John.
I love it. These are the stories that I think are so exciting, Matthew, because I think we can get caught up in this mindset of, if I'm not preaching, if I'm not discipling, if I'm not sharing the gospel in some overt way, then I'm not doing ministry.
Yep.
Or I'm not partnering with God in the ways that He's changing the world. Because if it's not a one-to-one, I do this thing and a follower of Jesus comes out the other side in that moment, then I'm not doing ministry. I'm not working with God.
What an image you just put in my head there. I'm just thinking about those cartoons where you've got like the conveyor belt and then the machine that stamps down. Yes. And on the other side is this thing, right? And it's not quite like that, right?
Exactly.
Like even scripture itself, just stuff is messy and it's not linear. And it's like, I think IVP has published a few books about this topic. Like it's, so anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yes.
Go ahead.
No, this is fantastic. I love these stories because what we hope that this podcast does is, as alumni and even non-alumni who are listening to this but are wondering, what does it look like for me to partner with God in the work that He's doing, that these kinds of stories that somebody might say, oh, someone working for this dance company that's helping students have more access to tutoring and getting into college and these kinds of things. Yep. They're like, oh, wait a second. Maybe I'm not doing that, but I am doing this other thing. You're telling me that that's part of the work that God's doing to change the world?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And so much of it has to do with, like you said before, the mindset that you go into it with. Is this for me, or is this for changing the lives of the people around me? Because God has sent me to this space on purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. Matthew, as you think about these things, are there some formative threads that you can look back on with your time with InterVarsity that you say, when I was a student, when I was a staff, during those hands-on, very direct days with InterVarsity, God was doing a work in me that was preparing me for this now?
Absolutely. So I think the number one thing for me is that transformation is real and that it only comes from the Lord. I think that for me, I remember that distinctly as a freshman, right? And again, keep in mind, I grew up in church. I got baptized when I was 11. I was a very churchy kid, loved Jesus. But for me, this idea of this being a choice that I get to make, or at least something that I'm doing because I really want to do it and not just as a rule following thing. Because I think that's what Ivy gave me, was this idea of this is not about rule following. Which again had been said to me, but just because somebody says something to you doesn't mean that you really fully understand it. And it was at 18 that I get to really fully embrace that and kind of explore that stuff. And it just started on this journey to just keep really falling in love with the Lord. But for me, the thing that stuck with me is this idea that the transformation comes from this, right? It's not just about getting to the final destination, right? Which is nice. We appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be good. Not in a hurry, but excited about it, right? But it's bigger than that. I should be a different person, right? In some way that's tangible. Tangible to me personally, but also tangible to people around me, right? And I don't think we've always named what that is. And that's what's been a huge exploration for me. And even in recent years, it's like, oh, no, this is part of that transformation. So the way I think about the world, the way I think about other people, the way I think about like I need to trace all of those things back to this transformation that happened with me. Again, this love God, love others thing is it's the crux of it all, right? And I mean, again, not to preach, not to get up, but if you think about like all the laws in the Old Testament, most of them were really about how to deal with other people, right? Why is that? Because that is what we're called to do. We're called to, in response to Him, right, treat other folks differently, and in response to that, other folks will see that there's a different way to live, there's a different way to be, there's a different way to interact, and then they'll be able to trace that to, oh, that's right, those are the God people, right? That is, again, not trying to oversimplify stuff, but that's what I'm learning and growing into, and so like, IV put me on the track to really start to deal with and navigate and explore what does transformation look like. And I just feel like each and every day I'm just trying to be more and more transformed and trying to have my perspective changed,
Yes. No, at risk of actually being the one to oversimplify, it sounds to me like to use use more InterVarsity language that there were important movements that happened and continue to move for you in what it looks like to love God, to love His Word, to love His people, and to love His purposes.
Absolutely.
And that being developed in those things helped prepare you as you stepped into staff work, which then provided opportunities for you to step into some of these other positions, and that has brought you to where you are now. For the broader audience of alumni who are listening to this conversation, is there a final word of encouragement that you would give to your fellow alumni who are trying to figure out, what does it look like for me to partner with God in His world-changing work in my context? Is there a word of encouragement or advice that you would give?
Absolutely. Well, the word of encouragement I would say is, especially if you're an alumni in particular, what God did with you in college is on purpose, and it's still valuable, right? So it wasn't wasted. A lot of things in your life have changed, maybe. But that time was important and it was valuable. And so maybe this might be a time to go back and say, okay, what did happen? Because you might not have thought about it in a while, right? The other thing I'll say is open your eyes. Ask God to open your eyes for wherever you are. Don't always look for the next thing. Literally go back and read Jeremiah 29 again and say, I'm here. So as long as I'm here, God, what do you have for me? A lot of beautiful things will happen for you. And you'll be surprised at how much amazing work you can do, that God will do through you, if you just say, what do you have for me while I'm here? That could be for a week. It could be for 3 years. It could be for 10. It could be for the rest of your life. But you keep asking that question enough, and you will be shocked by how much incredible work God can do through you by just asking that question.
How is God inviting you to bring shalom in your context after graduation, alumni? It might not be through dance or any other artistic medium, but you absolutely have a part in that process. What passions has God given you? What opportunities has He put in front of you? And what is the unique impact that you get to have as a follower of Jesus in that space? Send us a DM on Instagram. We would really love to hear about it. Then be sure to come back next week for another episode of The Afterwards with Selah. We're going to spend some time hitting the highlights of our recent Big Questions series. Until then, consider sharing this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and I will see you in the after, alumni. Thanks for listening to After 4. This podcast is brought to you by the InterVarsity Alumni Relations Team, hosted and produced by John Steele, production assistance by Mike Zentera, edited by Caleb Leppert, and our After 4 theme music was written and performed by John Steele.